Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of SWPPP Radio with WGR Southwest. I am your host, Matt Lewis, and we are back again today with John Teravskis. Hello,
hey, this season's just never going to end, is it?
That's right. It's the never-ending season. And so today's a bit unique. We have a guest with us today. We have Jesse Allen, who is a QSP, QSD with Endemic Environmental Services. So welcome, Jesse.
Hi, thank you for having me on.
Yeah, it's great to have you, Jesse.
I'm excited to be on the podcast.
Well, we're very privileged to have you here, and I know you have a lot of experience with this new permit.
Oh yeah, quite a bit with this past storm season.
Well, that's why we wanted to come back. Season one, Matt, we were talking all about this new permit and what it would be like, and we were speculating about inspections. But here we are. What is it, April? Then we're almost done with the storm season. And I wanted to just have another podcast to talk about how it went. And so you did the inspections, I did inspections, Jesse did inspections. So I thought maybe we could have a little chat this morning and talk about how this season went. So let's start with, okay, we had this first rainy season under our belt under this new permit. Now, what was the balance of projects under the old permit and projects under the new permit? We had two permits in place. So how did it maybe change throughout the season? Jesse, what was your experience?
So at first, we probably had a 90% old permit, 10% new permit at the start of the season, just because a lot of our clients and contractors were proactive and tried to grandfather their projects in ahead of time before that September deadline. And so we had, at first, it was going very smoothly with 2009, very familiar territory. But as the season continued and we got further and further away from that date and projects were coming up, I'd say that the balance kind of shifted to be about a 70-30%, which made things difficult.
Yeah, and Matt, well, our experience was similar. We started with only maybe one site.
Yeah, that's about right. And then we got, let's see, I think I have two right now and a couple in the hopper. But yeah, it's slowly starting to shift.
Yeah, but that still was challenging, even if you were like 1 in 10 or 1 in 25, you still had to balance two different permits. And it was a challenge, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was definitely a challenge because monitoring requirements are different. The people who are monitoring is different. Even sampling is a bit different. The way we monitor exceedances. And so, yeah, it's definitely challenging.
And Jesse, what was life like for you having to balance these two permits?
Let's just say I'm excited for the end of the storm season. I got pretty good at juggling inspectors, QSPs, and the different job requirements, but I'm getting a little fatigued of juggling.
Yeah, looking at the NOAA forecast, right?
Daily, multiple times throughout the day for updates. Yeah, it definitely required a lot of oversight.
Right. And so you were always having to go, okay, is this a new permit project or an older permit project? And what were the rules and engagement for this project? And we were always having to remind ourselves.
Definitely.
Oh, yeah. We what we've established with Endemic is a project tracker that almost acts like a cheat sheet, because we've had this going on for a while, but we outlined which permits each project fell under, because oftentimes, especially with the projects that grandfathered themselves in, we would mentally know, oh yeah, this project started up in November or December, but it would be misleading to our inspectors, QSPs, after a busy week of running out to different sites, thinking that maybe this grandfathered in projects were 2022 permit projects. And
Right.
so it definitely required the development of different tools and stuff to help us stay on top of which project needed to comply with which permit.
Yeah, and I know we needed to update our online inspection app. We had to bring in new fields so that we could accommodate the forecast-driven inspections. And we also had to have a way to be able to determine whether it was qualifying or not qualifying.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So the water board said, you're going to love us. We're getting rid of the reefs. You're not going to have reefs. It's going to make your life so much easier. Did you experience that easy life this year?
No, not at all. I miss the reefs. Bring the reefs back.
Yes.
With the 2009 permit projects, the reefs act as a kind of a warning symbol, a warning alert for all of our inspectors and the clients. They would know that, hey, there's a storm event coming. We need to be proactive and address X, Y, Z. However, with the new permit without the reefs, there was less of that communication. We would communicate on site during the pre-storms. However, redundancy is the key to reliability. And so having
very well
multiple
said.
forms of communication is typically the best.
Yeah, and Matt, you didn't have to sign off on any reefs, but you certainly had to do more, right?
Yeah, because delegated inspectors can't do pre-storms, and so yeah, that was a challenge for sure. It was I go back and forth. You know, it's sometimes nice to not have to deal with reefs and just knock out a pre-storm. But you know, like Jesse said, without having that redundancy, it sort of leaves you open to the possibility that your site isn't prepared for that incoming storm.
Right. And reefs could not be delegated to a non-QSP. Now pre-storms can't be delegated. So a big difference is you are the one physically in the field.
Right. I'm a walking reef.
Yeah, walking reef. I like that. It's like the Walking Dead.
Yeah. Sometimes it feels like that.
Yeah. So I agree with you, Jesse. The reefs really helped define the storm event. It allowed us to lock it down and then say, all right, it's qualifying or it's not qualifying. And then that set off a chain of events. Matt, we got to the point here where we decided to lock things down too. How are we doing that?
Yeah, so because the 2022 is forecast regulated, basically, we had to basically call it when you monitor NOAA and you see that you have that 50% along with a half-inch precipitation forecast. You just have to call it, and then you just have to live by that screenshot. We screenshot it, upload it into our inspection, and you just have to live by that. You have to get your pre-storm in within 72 to 96 hours, and then that first during storm is based on whatever you put in that pre-storm report, and you just have to live and die by that, or you're just going to be on NOAA 24/7 and pulling your hair out as storms come in and out. And so yeah, you just kind of have to live and die by that storm report.
Yeah, you would drive yourself bonkers if you try to stay with the forecast because it's changing almost hour by hour sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Jesse, how did you guys do your weather forecasting?
We would check it every day in the morning. 6 a.m., 7 a.m. would be the timeline in which we would check the forecast at all of our sites, and we send out a notification to all of our QSPs, letting them know what their site conditions were like. However, the the most challenging part for me was the subsequent
Mm.
24-hour extended storm event inspections. There was a lot of tentatives in my schedule, and just like a SWIP, my my scheduling was a living document, frequently changing because of the need for the initial during storm, but then the possibility of a tentative subsequent during storm.
Mm.
Yeah, so did you call the subsequent days at the beginning before the event started, or did you wait until you were already into the event?
We would wait until we're already into the event. We would typically go by after the first during storm was performed. We would look on that day to see what the following 24-hour period would yield for rainfall. And we would have a tentative schedule. If it showed that it was far less than 0.25 inches, then we would consider it to be the end of the qualifying precipitation event. However, if it was showing above the 0.25 inches, then I would have the tentative going out for inspection. And like you said, storm events change by the hour often times. And so I would leave it up to the QSP to manage their delegates, to instruct them in the morning whether to proceed with going out or not. And needless to say, it resulted in a lot of early morning phone calls to me.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. In fact, we had the challenge of learning to document whether an event was qualifying or not qualifying, and those subsequent days were a real headache because we needed to prove to the water board or whoever would be asking, why did you go or not go? And with it constantly changing, we found that we had to be taking screenshots and recording the data just so that we could remember why we did or didn't
Right.
go.
Yeah. Yeah. The way I would do it is very similar to you, Jesse. Like I would be out on my during inspection. And as I'd be filling out that report in our inspection app, we have subsequent days, up to 3 days. And so you're literally checking NOAA right then because you need not only, well, you already would have done it for your pre-storm, but you're needing NOAA screenshots right then and there because as you're filling out your report, you need to document, the subsequent day is it having that quarter inch. And so it's almost like I thought of it almost as like a pre-storm for the subsequent day on that during storm day because you have to document it some way, so having that additional tabs to file in, up to 3 days in advance of storm projection is, and really, so it's just documentation is king when it comes to these things.
Of course, storm events don't play nicely, do
No,
they?
they never do.
They tend to come in on weekends.
Always, like usually about Friday at 1, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. You're like, I'm about to go home. And then, oh no.
And now I need to figure out what I'm going to do on Monday. And that's the subsequent day.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a real challenge this year. And Jesse, you not only had to bring along your own people at Endemic, but you have the contractors. And because you do a lot of Caltrans work, you also had Caltrans to bring along on this process. How was that this first storm season? It's new to everybody. How did it go trying to bring people along on this process?
It was very difficult. There's a lot of confusion. I oftentimes had to refer back to the permits and specs because, like you mentioned, so there's the 2009 CGP, the 2022 CGP, and the Caltrans specs that all need to be considered. For Caltrans specs, luckily, it's pretty, they are more stringent than the CGP. So you can default for those projects to follow that. However, there needs to be some reflection to the 2022 CGP because it does mention within the specs the QSP and QSD requirements similar to the 2022 CGP. But nevertheless, it's very confusing, especially whenever we get into counties that follow Caltrans specs as well as other cities and or organizations that follow those as well. And so a lot of reviewing documents, trust but verify your knowledge. And so,
right.
yeah, frequently reviewing.
Of course, then you have contractors saying, we never used to do it this way. Why are you doing this?
Oh, yeah, a lot of screen grabs and emails were sent out as well because
Mhm.
it's new to everyone. Everyone was trying to get with or get a good understanding of what's required and what's the meaning of the permits and requirements.
Okay, so now that we're almost all the way through the rainy season, we've had a lot of experience under both permits. Which one do you prefer? Which one has now maybe less inspections? How about the monitoring? We didn't even talk about sampling. If you had your choice, which permit would you live under?
I preferred the 2009 CGP. I know it's a typical for humans to not like change, but I didn't like the change. 2009 I found had a good amount of coverage and oversight. And luckily for this past rain season, a lot of my 2022 CGP projects were in relatively heavy rainfall areas. They're like in the Sierras or along the coast. However, I have some projects in that followed the 2009 CGP that were in a little bit more arid regions, and I believe, or I can anticipate, that as more arid regions have to comply with the 2022 CGP, we'll have less oversight and monitoring because in areas similar to Los Banos, where you don't get half inches of rain very frequently, there's not really going to be a lot of during storm or storm oversight for projects. And so I anticipate there being ultimately less inspections and less, uh, I guess, compliance oversight, but on the consultant end to our clients as the 2022 CGP begins to be fully adopted throughout California.
Man, what's your take on it? Which permit do you prefer? Which one ended up with less inspections?
Yeah, I agree with Jesse. I think that the '09 is a little bit more user friendly. Though the 2022 will have less inspections in certain regards, like for instance, qualifying precipitation events are, a half inch of rain with 50% probability. And so your storm events are, I think, on average going to be shorter and fewer as opposed to the '09, which can just stretch out endlessly. But with the '09, pre-storms are killing QSPs who have multiple sites in that are spread apart. For instance, I have a site in Madera, and to do a pre-storm in Madera when we're in here in low, that's a 2.5 hour trip. So it almost wipes out my whole day to go do one pre-storm, and I have multiple sites. And in 2025, once everything transitions, I usually manage between 5 to 10 sites on average, probably, and that's going to be a huge challenge. And then when it comes to sampling, we haven't really touched on that. The 2022 seems to de-incentivize contractors when it comes to NAL exceedances, whereas in the '09 we could average throughout the day and get an NAL exceedance down, whereas now in the 2022 it's basically one sample per discharge point, and that's it. If you're over, you're over. And not only that, but that will cost the contractor more because now you as a QSD and Jesse as a QSD and even me as a QSP, we have 14 days for both of us to be out on site to monitor that exemption or that exceedance. So which the 2022, another thing is going to cost a lot more money, just not only with inspections, but with foundational training, which we'll touch on here in a little bit. The training is much more extensive.
Well, let's talk about monitoring and NAL exceedances. As you mentioned, '09, it was an average. Under the 2022 CGP, every single point stands alone.
Right.
Now, I don't think the sites we had, Matt, did a lot of monitoring this year. One, they were risk ones, or two, they were in, like you said, fairly arid areas, or just the way they were configured, they didn't really have a lot of discharge occurring. Jesse, did you guys do some sampling under the new permit this year?
Luckily for me, no, because same for you. It was I had a risk level 1 LUP startup as well as other risk level 1 projects. So it was fairly easy on that side of things, luckily.
But as we get more and more time, we're going to end up with sites that have more sampling.
Yeah.
Oh
And
yeah.
it will be interesting. I predict there will be a whole lot more NAL instances. So we use delegated inspectors a lot. In fact, the last session right before this, you were giving a delegated foundational training.
Yep.
What's it been like getting these delegated inspectors up to speed with the new requirements? I think the guidance came out from the construction general permit team, and they said 2 hours foundational and 2.5 hours site-specific training. I don't know about you, but that seems like a lot of time to me.
Yeah.
Of course, you didn't have any problems filling 2 hours with foundational.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I can blabber on about the permit for 2 hours pretty easily, but on-site has been, I've only done one so far, but I have a couple more scheduled. That is a little more difficult to extend into 2 hours, especially
2.5
hours, especially considering that the contractor that we're using actually doesn't sample. They have a separate subcontractor that samples. So
yeah, it's going to be a challenge.
Yeah.
And you're going to be like, okay, how about we go to breakfast? Maybe we take the pH pen and turbidity meter and talk about it over an omelet.
Right. And I actually have it, so everyone can see the water board, right, has given the little guidelines. And I was looking, they kind of break it down for on-site. They say site-specific training should be 20 minutes, site-specific SWP and implementation, 30 minutes plus a site walk for site-specific BMP implementation, 30 minutes for visual inspections plus a site walk, and then sampling training should take about an hour. So right there it has 2 hours and 20 minutes that they try to segment out for you. But I don't know. What do you think, Jesse? Do you think that you can fill 2.5 hours of site-specific training without totally annoying your contractors?
In the field, I find that I can talk forever. I like to explain the different BMPs and talk about why things are needed where. And so I found that it was fairly easy on the field inspection component of being out and monitoring this, going out to the site and looking at the SWP implementation. However, I did start to lose my voice after a couple of days in a row.
Yeah.
There's a lot to go over. It was very helpful to have copies of the SWP on site available for us to review. But then I also had printouts of our water pollution control drawings and kind of highlighted as select areas, as well as we didn't necessarily bring our equipment into the field during our training days because those are often done during non-rainy days. And so I would have videos initially on how to calibrate, use equipment, some intricacies with the equipment that we use. But then whenever the field component would come, I would talk about the BMPs, talk about the discharge points, and then the best ways to sample those discharge points. And I found that it did help our delegated inspectors with some of the unique circumstances or approaches that might have to be taken based off of the different types of discharge points that we have. If there was a weird discharge point, fairly simple. However, if there's an area that's likely to just get sheet flow, I could show them the best way to approach sampling those areas. And
Yeah,
so
that's good.
ultimately better inspectors, but pretty taxing on the QSDs.
I'm going to have you come do all my site specific training.
Fantastic.
You know, what I think is a hard thing here is the rigidity of the standard. I think there are sites that you could easily fill 2.5 hours. You know, I'm thinking the site you and I originally worked on, Jesse, that was 5 miles long. You know, we had 40 discharge points. 2.5 hours is not a problem there. But let's say a site barely over an acre.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of those time considerations you mentioned, Matt, maybe if you're addressing that only point, or that point only, I should say, maybe the time would be okay. But the problem is the next section is somewhat related, and you already kind of covered it. And the one after that is still somewhat related, and you've already covered that a little bit.
Right.
So when you put it all together, I just feel like the time's a little too excessive.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know the contractor that I just recently dealt with, he thought it was too excessive as well. But, you know, it is what it is. And, you know, you do what you can.
Yeah.
But this site that I did also was very simple. Flat site, one discharge location. So, you know, but yeah, like I think I even remember going out with you to the first sites that you did out on the highway or whatever. And yeah, that's easy. You know, you could fill up that time, no problem.
Yeah, if not 4 hours.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we not only had QSBs doing inspections, but Jesse, you and I had to strap on our boots a couple times as QSDs and do inspections. How did that go for you?
I kind of liked the requirements for the QSD inspections. It gave me a reason to get out of the office and do strictly do the admin stuff, to be more field based, see what the updates are for the field, and then yeah, get my boots dirty. I oftentimes would come back with some better insight for my QSPs and delegates on, oh, you know, this would work better instead of this corrective action. And so, because even though I'm reviewing everything, it doesn't beat being out in the field. However, it's very busy, and trying to meet that 30 inspection requirement within 30 days of the project starting. And luckily, we haven't had any NALs, but I anticipate whenever NALs pop up, it's going to be very complicated trying to juggle around my schedule, as well as take care of all the projects that are requiring me to come out because of like any sampling or by those strict time requirements.
Yeah. You know, one of the biggest challenges I found with that first 30-day inspection is knowing when construction actually started. So many times I'm not in the loop. They're not telling me. They're not saying, hey, by the way, next Tuesday, we're going to start construction. I won't know unless I ask. So I'm having to constantly ask them, hey, by the way, have you started this? Have you, when are you going to start it? Just yesterday, I had a contractor say, oh yeah, we started up on March 17th. I'm like, it's April 18th. It doesn't give me much time to get out there.
Right.
Not at all.
I saw another email from you where you reached out and the guy was like, oh, we're not starting until fourth quarter of this year. So.
Yeah. So now I got to remember,
right,
come October to start asking again.
Right.
It's almost like a constant state of anxiety. Are you started yet? Are you started yet? Are you started yet?
Yeah.
I typically try to not wait until the last minute, if just to err on the side of caution that maybe, a lot of times there's the confusion maybe with clients where they think that because they haven't graded or started any ground disturbance work, that it's not technically started. However, I would arrive on site and there would be a full staging yard and track out controls and BMPs already implemented. And so I would typically try to err on the side of caution and do it within 15 days of the initial starting day, just in case they got a head start and started a week before.
Yeah, I've had a few projects where they wanted to start ASAP, so that wasn't a problem. The permit issuance was roughly equal to the construction start, and that worked out nice. What's interesting about the new permit is it really doesn't say what a QSD is doing when they're out there. It just says you got to do these inspections first 30 days and twice a year while it's going on. But unlike the QSP inspections that tell them exactly what they need to be checking for, it doesn't really tell us. Now, we can guess and we can take an educated guess at what needs to happen. But I actually have kind of repurposed those inspections to accomplish something with SWP writing. One of the challenges with SWP writing has always been to have a complete materials list of all the different materials present on site, their control mechanisms, secondary containment, and inventory of materials. And although we know we have to get down to SWP, we really haven't done a good job over the years of doing that. So now with my QSD inspections, that's my role. Now I go out and, okay, what materials do we have present on site? Which then means a SWP amendment. I add them to the SWP. Now under the new permit, there's a couple other things we got to track, like the stockpile of BMPs, like a pallet of fiber roll, pallet of compost sock, maybe some visqueen plastic in the staging area. So I will do that. I'll look at also spill response equipment and all of those things that we've often had as blank or very nebulous or very generic in our SWPs. Now when I'm there, I'm gathering that detail to put back into the SWP. And I found that to be actually a good purpose or thing that I'm doing when I'm out doing the inspections. Of course, I'm looking for BMP failures just like a QSP would, but I'm doing some things that maybe a QSP would not traditionally be doing.
Huh.
So
that's a great use of the QSD inspection. I'm probably even going to start doing that myself. Great idea.
all right. Well, you come help me with my training of my on-site people, and I'll help you with your QSD inspections.
Sounds like a plan.
Okay, I think we touched on QSDs. Is there anything else you'd like to say about QSD inspections, Jesse, that you think the viewers might like to know? Or
I would just say that, and this is the approach that I've taken. The QSD initial inspection is a great opportunity to really touch base with the foreman and superintendent that are on site implementing and managing the folks that are performing the project, and letting them know the purpose and reasoning for all of the BMPs. A lot of times there's a disconnect and it's almost perceived as a checking the box. Oh yeah, we have this. But I like to use those opportunities to show them that, look, there was thought into placing these BMPs and how they're going to help the site continue with their production. Because ultimately, our clients, they want to complete their production, their side of things, which is production of whatever construction project it is. And our goal is to help them throughout that without any delays and just to continue as long as they stay in compliance. And so I like to use that time to kind of connect and let them know that it's all for production ultimately.
Yeah, I like that. And I think that was the intent of the permit writers. So good job.
Well, we have season 2 coming up. This is probably going to be the final episode of season 1.
We keep saying that.
Yeah,
I think we've
I
said
know.
that for about 5
Yeah,
broadcasts now.
I think that's about right. But as we touched on these new requirements for delegated inspectors, i.e. foundational training, yeah, so John, what are we going to be looking forward to this next coming season?
Yeah, actually, we decided season 2, we're going to make it foundational training. So rather than have someone sit in a classroom for 2 hours, although the breakfast idea sounds really cool.
Yeah.
I might be tempted to do that. But we thought while they're driving around, they can listen to podcasts and hear all of the foundational topics that we need to cover. And they could do that while they're driving to and from sites or to and from home, and be able to catch as catch can all of these foundational topics. And the nice thing is, it's a one-time only deal. Once you've done your foundational training, you're done for all the other projects. You just now have to do the site-specific training. So this will be a season that certainly delegate inspectors will want to take advantage of. It might be a very economical way to knock out their foundational training. But I think the topics we're going to touch on are going to be meaningful to QSPs and QSDs and others who are involved with the construction general permit too. I think they'll glean a lot of good information from it.
Right on. Yeah, it sounds good. I'm looking forward to it. And Jesse, before we sign off, do you have any final thoughts for us?
Not really. I'm a subscriber, so I'm excited to see what season 2 has to come. And I definitely am going to get my delegated inspectors on board, because especially whenever I have back-to-back trainings, because I could use some help keeping all my inspectors up to speed.
Right on. What about you, John? Any final thoughts?
Well, I think we learned a lot this year. I think there were things that we expected to happen, and they did, but there were a lot of things that I think turned out a little differently than we expected. And I think as we get more and more experience under this new permit, we'll learn more, we'll refine our methods a little more so that it streamlines. But I think what we learned is this last season is life is doable under a new permit, maybe different, maybe more difficult in ways, but we're going to be okay. We're going to survive it.
We will survive. All right. Well, folks, this may in fact be the last episode of season 1, and we thank you so much for sticking around for us. And we look forward to season 2. And thank you, Jesse and Endemic Environmental Services. We really appreciate all you do. And hopefully we'll talk again soon.
Oh, yeah. Thank you for having me on.
All right.
All right. Thanks.